Hey folks, David from Sunday Sounds here with a quick tutorial on how to adjust the tempo or transpose one of our song-specific MainStage patches. Because our MainStage patches use some pretty complex programming to deliver the really big sounds that a lot of our patches have, it just takes a couple of steps to transpose these patches so that you can play them in a different key. But once you've learned this process, you can apply it on any of the song-specific patches that you purchase from SundaySounds.com. First, I'm just going to show you how to adjust the tempo. This is really quick. So I've got our patch for So Will I loaded into my concert, and here in edit mode, I'm just going to select that patch, and then down here in the patch settings area, you just want to go to the attributes tab, and right here is where you can change the tempo. So you can drag the slider to adjust the tempo, or you can just type in your new tempo if you need to do it a little slower or a little faster. And then you can also always use a tap tempo button if you need to be able to adjust the tempo of the song on the fly. I'm going to go back to the original tempo here. So that's all you need to do to be able to set the tempo of any of our song-specific MainStage patches. We always use the original BPM from the recording as the default, but if you need to adjust it, that's how you do it. Next, we're going to talk about transposing. And there are two steps that you need to follow in order to transpose any of our song-specific patches. The first involves moving the physical channel strip layers. That's these colored layers that float over your on-screen keyboard in MainStage. So for this example, we're using our patch for So Will I, which is in the key of A. And in this scenario, we're going to pretend that we want to move it down two half steps rather, from the key of A down to the key of G. So the first step is to move all of these layers over. And this is how I recommend doing this. I like to kind of make my channel strip area pretty small so that I can only see one layer at a time. And this helps me just to make sure that I don't miss any layers and that I don't do any layers twice. That'll make sense in just a second. So I'm going to select this first channel strip. I've scrolled all the way over to the left, so this is my first channel strip here. And we're just going to go to the Layer Editor tab. And so all you want to do here is you can either manually drag the layer over two half steps. So we're going two half steps down here. So to do that, I would click in the middle area of the layer and I would drag it down one step and one half step and then another half step. That would be one way to do it. The other way to do it, if you're a little worried about making sure that's accurate, is to use the high key and low key options here. So if we're going down two half steps, you would just press the little down button 2 times, and then it would shift for you. If you have a lot of layers, I kind of recommend doing it this way because then you make sure that you didn't accidentally move anything too far or too little. So then we're going to just scroll over here, and you can see how having this one channel strip wide space makes it easy to stay organized. I'm going to go over to the next channel strip, and you have to select it so it highlights in gray, and then we're going to give it the same treatment. We're just going to go down twice, and then we're going to scroll over again. And we're going to go down twice. 1, 2, 1, 2. And we're just going to repeat this process for every layer in the patch. It might seem like this will take a little while, but it's usually not too bad. And once you've done it a couple of times, you'll get really comfortable. It'll only take you a minute or two. So just bear with me while I move these layers over. The second step we're going to talk about in just a second refers to the chord trigger layers that we use on some of the channel strips. Unfortunately, you can't just transpose those or move the layers over. When you move the layers over, they actually don't respond in the way that we would like. So you actually have to open up those chord trigger MIDI effects one at a time. Just give them a little bit of extra attention. All right, so we've reached the end here. So we have every single layer moved down 2 half steps. That's taking this patch from A to G. But if we played it right now, it wouldn't sound right. Might not necessarily sound bad, but all of our chord trigger layers are still going to be playing either in the original key, or they're not going to be playing any triggers at all. Just depends on the patch a little bit. So what we need to do is we're going to scroll all the way back over to the beginning of our channel strip section. And we need to look for every instance of the chord trigger MIDI effect. And we need to open them up and just do a little bit of editing there. So this first channel strip, the piano, doesn't have any instances of chord triggers, so you don't need to worry about it. We're going to go to the second one here, and we can see that this one does. So I'm going to highlight the channel strip. This just makes it easy for me to make sure that I know which channel strip I'm editing. Then I'm going to click right here in the middle of the chord trigger section. It's going to open up like this. Now I recommend when you open up that first instance of chord trigger, clicking this little lock signal there. That means when you open up another effect, this window is going to automatically close. It helps you stay organized and make sure that you're not accidentally messing with the wrong chord trigger instance. So now that we've got this instance of chord trigger open, all we need to do is click here in the middle section of the trigger keys area in blue, and we're going to drag this layer down 2 half steps. This is very similar to how you can drag layers down here in the layer editor, but we're just actually dragging the chord trigger notes instead. So you just want to pay attention to what your high key is, and you want to make sure, and then have an eye on where it needs to end up. So high key here in the trigger is A, and if we wanted to take it down 2 half steps, that would be G sharp, and then down to G. So we're going to click in the middle of the trigger key section, and we're going to drag it down 1 step, 1 half step, and then 2 half steps. And you'll see when it pops in and you see that right there, you'll know. It just takes a little bit of practice to get good at this and get comfortable. But once you're done, then it's ready to go. So now we're going to scroll over to our next channel strip, and we can see that this also has an instance of chord trigger. And when you click on that new channel strip, it's automatically going to switch over to that instance of chord trigger. You don't have to click on it again. So you can see when I was on this channel strip, the chord trigger looked like this. And then when I went over to the next one, it automatically went over to the next instance. So it helps you just make sure you're not accidentally editing the same chord trigger twice. So here again, this one, we can see we have a high note of A. So we need to bring that down to G. So we're going to click in the middle of the trigger area, and we're going to drag it down to A. I'm going to go to our next, click there, and we're going to do this the same way. Now one thing to note, if you're transposing up, so if we were going from A to B, then I would look at your low note and visualize that low note up 2 half steps instead of your high note down. It's just a little easier to keep track of the extreme and then move that in the direction that you want to go. That's what I've found. All right, so this next channel strip is a little important because it has 2 instances of chord trigger. And nesting these chord trigger instances is an effect that we use on some, but not all, of our MainStage patches to give us some MIDI sequencing ability that MainStage doesn't readily make available with a single plugin. So anytime you see 2 instances of the chord trigger MIDI effect, it's just really important that you adjust both of them like we've been talking about. So I always like to close chord trigger just to make sure that I know which one I'm working with. So I'm going to open chord trigger back up, and you treat it the exact same way. The only important thing to note is just that there's 2 of them instead of 1. So I'm dragging this down to G, and then I'm going to click on this second instance of chord trigger. And this one I'm going to drag down 2 steps as well. So my high note here is E, and I'm going to visualize it going down 2 half steps. So E down to D sharp, and then down to D. So I'm going to click in the middle, and I'm going to drag it down, just like that. And my next channel strip doesn't have any instances of chord trigger, so I'm going to skip it, and I'm going to go to the next one. And you see that one opened up a little funny because of the different position. So I'm just going to click on chord trigger. It's not a big deal. Anytime it doesn't open up to chord trigger, just click on the MIDI effect, and you'll be right back where you need to be. And I'm going to drag this one down, right there. I'm going to go to my next one. You can see it opened up the MIDI modifier here instead of chord trigger. So I'm just going to click on chord trigger, drag it down that whole step, go to my next channel strip, and it doesn't have the modifier. And that's it. So we've now addressed every single layer we moved down 2 half steps because we're going from A to G. So you would just count up the appropriate number of half steps. Then after you've moved all of those layers, the appropriate number of steps or half steps, then you go back to the beginning and you scroll through. And anytime you find an instance of chord trigger, you open it up and you drag these trigger keys here in blue down or up the appropriate number of half steps. And I recommend looking at the extreme to determine where your starting point is and then where you want to end up. So if we were going to bring this one down another whole step from G to F, we would start here and look at this G and say, I want that to end up on F. And if it does, then you're going to be good to go. So now that we've transposed this patch, that means we can play it in G. So that's really all there is to transposing our song-specific patches. I know it took a minute for me to do here in this video. I was doing it kind of slow just to make sure that it was easy to follow along. But don't be intimidated by this process. Once you've learned how to do it, it's really nothing at all, and you'll get comfortable really, really fast. Just remember the 2 steps. First, move your channel strip layers, either dragging the layers or my recommended method of using the high and low key options to bring them down or up. And then after you've moved all of the layers up or down the appropriate number of steps or half steps, then open up your first instance of chord trigger, make sure that this little link icon is highlighted in purple, and then drag your layers here with the blue trigger key section up or down the appropriate number of half steps. Just be sure to visualize your starting point and where you want it to end up. So there's really no limit to how many steps you could transpose one of these patches. If you're going a large number of steps, I recommend picking the shortest path if you're kind of on the fence about whether to transpose up or down. But you can try it both ways and see which sounds better for you. And then the other thing that I will say is that a few of our patches use some sample-based instruments. For example, our patch for the song Real Love has those vocal samples. That method of transposition will not work for those vocal samples. So for instances like that, you'd actually need to open up those samples in an audio editor like Logic or Pro Tools, transpose the vocal samples, and then drop them back into your concert. But that's beyond the scope of this video. So check out some YouTube tutorials on how to transpose audio in your favorite digital audio workstation, and that will help you hit the ground running there. The last thing I'm going to leave you with before I wrap up this video is that before you start to transpose, it's really a great idea to make a backup copy of your patch file if you don't already have one. Now, if you dragged your patch into your concert, then that means you automatically have a backup copy. That's the .patch file that came with your original download. But when you've created a transposed patch, it's not a bad idea to just rename it so that it's really distinct from your original. So I would just add another dash here and type in key of G. And then when I wanted to save this patch outside of my concert so that I could use it later, just hit Command E to export. You could save it wherever you wanted to, and then you would have both patches available to you. So then you don't save over your original download. That means if you have any trouble transposing, or if you need to transpose the other direction later or play the song in the original key, you have both available to you. So that's what I'll leave you with. I hope this video was helpful. If you've watched this video and you've given this a try a couple times and you're still having trouble, we'd be happy to help. Just use the contact form on our website to send us an email. Thanks for watching.